This 4-year-old beggar girl is thrown in a dumpster by a priest who shouted, "God said that's where she belongs." But a millionaire saw everything and something shocking happens. Comment. What you think will happen, your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The rain beat hard on the asphalt of the town square in Harmony Creek, creating small rivers that ran down the streets of the quaint upstate New York town. It was a grey morning in June, and the biting cold made the few people on the street walk quickly, seeking shelter in shops or under the awnings of the brownstones that surrounded the First Presbyterian Church. At 4 years old, Lily knew well the feeling of cold that penetrated to the bones. For 3 months, she had been living on the streets after running away from St. Jude's orphanage, surviving on scraps of food found in the trash and the occasional kindness of passers-by who took pity on such a small child wandering alone. Her brown hair was tangled and dirty, her torn clothes barely protected her from the weather, and her big eyes seemed to hold secrets that no child should carry. That morning, as the rain intensified, Lily ran to take shelter near the side entrance of the church, where large trash dumpsters were located. Her little hands trembled with cold as she carefully rummaged through the debris, looking for any leftover food that could satisfy the constant hunger she felt. She had learned to be quick and quiet. Any noise could attract unwanted attention. It was when her hands found a piece of bread, still relatively fresh, that the shadow fell over her. Lily looked up and saw the imposing figure of Father Michael standing at the side entrance of the church, his dark eyes fixed on her with an expression that made her recoil instinctively. "What are you doing here, you filthy creature?" The clergyman's voice echoed with a harshness that made Lily shrink even more. "How many times do I have to tell you that this is no place for people like you?" Lily tried to move away, but her little legs were not fast enough. The priest advanced toward her with an inexplicable fury, as if the mere presence of the girl was a personal offense against him and against everything that sacred place represented. "God has revealed to me where you belong," he growled, grabbing Lily by her thin arms with a force that made her cry out in pain. "And it's not here sullying the house of the Lord?" With a brusque and violent movement, Father Michael lifted the girl off the ground and threw her into the largest dumpster, causing her to fall on organic waste and wet papers. The impact left her stunned for a few seconds, while the acrid smell of the debris invaded her nostrils. "This is your place, here with the rest of the garbage of this town." The priest's words echoed through the rainy morning like a sentence. "And if I see you near the church again, it will be much worse." About 20 yards away, inside a black BMW parked on Main Street, Richard Harding watched the whole scene with wide eyes of shock and indignation. The 52-year-old businessman had stopped the car to answer an important call about his car dealerships when he witnessed what had just happened. Richard knew Father Michael by sight. He was a respected figure in the community, always present at the town's social events and religious celebrations that Richard attended with his family. Seeing that man assault a defenseless child with such cruelty left him completely paralyzed, as if he could not process that it was really happening. When he finally reacted and got out of the car, the priest had already disappeared into the church, and Lily had managed to get out of the dumpster and was running desperately down the street, her bare feet slipping on the wet asphalt. Richard tried to follow her, but the girl knew every alley and every hiding place in that town, disappearing among the old buildings like a haunted ghost. Standing alone in the rain with his heart pounding, Richard felt something change inside him. The image of that child being thrown in the trash as if she were a worthless object had been indelibly etched in his mind. As a family man and a man of faith, he could not understand how a representative of God could commit such an atrocity. For the rest of that morning, Richard could not concentrate on anything else. He cancelled all the meetings of the day and drove around town looking for any sign of the girl, but she had simply disappeared. The guilt for not acting more quickly gnawed at him like a poison, making him question his own courage and humanity. When he arrived home for lunch, his wife Carol immediately noticed that something was wrong. Married for 25 years, she knew every expression of her husband and knew that he was deeply disturbed by something. "Did something happen at the office?" she asked, serving the plate while watching her husband's closed face. "No, it's nothing related to work," Richard replied, stirring distractedly in the food without being able to eat. It's a complicated situation I witnessed this morning." Carol waited for him to elaborate, but Richard remained silent, lost in thoughts that seemed to consume him completely. She knew that when her husband became like this, introverted and distant, he was facing some moral dilemma that affected him deeply. That afternoon, instead of returning to work, Richard went out again to look for the girl. He spoke discreetly with local merchants, asked homeless people who knew the streets, visited all the places where a child in a street situation could take shelter. But Lily had become even more elusive and distrustful after the incident with the priest, avoiding any human contact. As the days passed, Richard's obsessive search for the girl began to affect all aspects of his life. He neglected important meetings, arrived late for appointments, and showed a constant concern that his family could not understand. Carol tried to talk to him about this change in behavior, but Richard simply said that he was resolving an important issue without ever going into details. The weight of guilt and the disturbing image of that rainy morning haunted him day and night, turning his life into a desperate search for redemption and a second chance to do the right thing. 3 weeks had passed since that rainy morning, and Richard's life had turned into a routine of fruitless search. Every morning, before going to the dealerships, he walked the streets of the town looking for signs of the girl. Every afternoon, he made up excuses to leave the office and continue searching. His secretaries began to comment among themselves about the boss's constant absences, and some important clients showed irritation with the frequent postponements of meetings. Carol watched her husband wither day after day, but her attempts at conversation were met with evasions and prolonged silences. Richard had lost weight, slept poorly, and she often found him on the porch during the early hours of the morning, looking at the street as if waiting for something or someone to appear. "Richard, you need to tell me what's going on," Carol insisted one Tuesday morning, blocking the passage of her husband who was heading for the door. "It's been 3 weeks since you've been the same man. The employees are worried, I'm worried, and you keep acting as if you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." "It's complicated, Carol. It's not something I can simply explain and resolve," he replied, looking away, "but I promise it will pass soon." "Nothing passes on its own, Richard, and I've been your wife for 25 years. If something is tormenting you like this, I have the right to know." Richard stared at her for a long moment, fighting against the impulse to tell everything. But how to explain that he was obsessed with a street child he had witnessed being assaulted by a priest? How to justify that he had abandoned practically all his professional commitments to look for someone who might not even want to be found? "Trust me, please. Just for a few more days," was all he could say before leaving home, leaving Carol with tears in her eyes and a growing feeling that her marriage was disintegrating for reasons she could not understand. That afternoon, when Richard had already given up on finding the girl and considered the possibility of seeking professional help to deal with his obsession, he made the decision to make one last search in the most remote area of the town. He drove to the old bridge that crossed the creek on the way out to the highway, a place where some homeless people used to take shelter. It was there, under the concrete structure, among accumulated garbage and low vegetation, that he finally found her. Lily was curled up in a kind of nest made with cardboard and old cloths, her little body trembling violently. Even from a distance, Richard could hear her panting and irregular breathing. The girl was clearly sick. Her pale skin contrasted with the reddish spots of fever, and a dry, persistent cough escaped from her chapped lips. "My God," Richard murmured, approaching slowly so as not to scare her. "Girl, you're very sick." Lily opened her eyes when she heard the voice, but she no longer had the strength to run away as she had done before. Her big, deep eyes watched him with a mixture of fear and resignation, as if she had already given up fighting for her own survival. "I'm not going to hurt you," Richard said softly, crouching down at a respectful distance. "I need to take you to a place where they can take care of you. You're very ill." The girl did not answer, not because she did not want to, but because she seemed unable to emit any sound beyond the cough that consumed her. Richard realized that she was in critical condition, and that every minute lost could be fatal. Without thinking about the consequences, he approached and carefully wrapped her in his jacket, feeling how the little body was too hot and at the same time shivering with cold. Lily did not resist. She was too weak for that. She just let herself be carried like an injured bird. During the drive to his house, Richard tried to elaborate an explanation for Carol, but he knew that there was no gentle way to present a street child in a deplorable state and simply announce that she would stay with them. However, Lily's condition did not allow him to take her to a hospital without first trying to stabilize her minimally. When he arrived home, Carol was in the kitchen preparing dinner. The sound of the door and her husband's hurried steps made her turn around, but nothing could have prepared her for what she saw: Richard carrying a dirty and sick child in his arms. "Richard, who is this girl?" Carol's voice came out louder than normal, mixing surprise and panic. "She needs immediate help, Carol. She has a very high fever and can barely breathe," he replied, heading for the guest room. "Can you help me take care of her? I'll explain everything later." "Wait a minute. You can't just bring a strange child into our house without explanation." Carol followed him down the hallway, her voice rising higher and higher. "Richard, have you lost your mind? Where did this girl come from?" "Please, Carol, we'll talk later. Now she needs urgent medical care." Richard placed Lily carefully on the bed, noting how she seemed even smaller and more fragile lying on the clean sheets. Carol watched the child for a moment, her maternal instinct fighting against her indignation and confusion. The girl was obviously very sick. Her breathing was labored, and she occasionally moaned softly in her semi-conscious state. "I'll get the thermometer and some medicine," she said finally, her caring nature momentarily overcoming her objections. "But Richard, you're going to explain every detail of this situation to me. Now." As Carol left the room, Richard sat on the edge of the bed and watched Lily closely for the first time. She was even smaller than he had imagined, probably weighed half of what a healthy child her age should weigh. Her little hands were dirty and scratched, her nails broken, and there were small scars on her arms that suggested a life of deprivation and possibly mistreatment. But it was when Carol returned with medication and began to try to lower Lily's fever that they discovered something that would completely change the dynamics of the situation. The girl did not speak. She did not emit a single word. She just watched everything around her with big, scared eyes, as if she was constantly expecting something terrible to happen. "She doesn't speak?" Carol asked, trying to get Lily to drink some water. "I haven't heard her voice yet," Richard replied, feeling a pang in his chest as he realized the extent of the trauma the child might have suffered. That night, while Lily finally slept with her fever slightly lower, Richard told Carol the whole story. What he had witnessed at the church, his obsessive search for the girl, and how he had found her almost dying under the bridge. The silence that followed was heavy and tense. Carol processed the information, trying to understand how her life had become so complicated in a matter of hours. "Richard, do you realize what you've done?" she said finally, her voice controlled but full of conflicting emotions. "You brought a completely unknown child into our house. We know nothing about her family, about her history. And now? What do you intend to do now? The first week with Lily in the Hardings' house was a test of endurance for everyone involved. The girl had physically recovered from the fever, but her behavior revealed traumas much deeper than Richard had imagined. During the day, she remained in absolute silence, watching every movement around her with an almost disturbing attention, as if she was constantly assessing possible threats. The nights were even more difficult. Lily woke up regularly screaming, sweating cold and trembling. But when Richard or Carol ran to console her, she shrank into the corner of the bed and stared at them with terror, as if she did not recognize where she was. During these episodes, she babbled incomprehensible words and pointed to empty corners of the room, as if she saw something that only she could perceive. "She's reliving something terrible," Carol commented one morning, after another sleepless night. "I've never seen a child so afraid of everything and everyone." But the behavior that most disturbed the couple was Lily's relationship with food. She flatly refused to eat anything served on plates or at the table. She only accepted food when Carol placed it directly on the floor. And even then, Lily ate quickly, like a hungry animal, fearing that the food would be taken away at any moment. "It's as if she's learned that she doesn't deserve to sit at the table with normal people," Richard observed, feeling his heart clench as he watched the girl squatting on the kitchen floor, eating pieces of bread with her hands. Worst of all, however, were the panic attacks that struck Lily whenever she heard church bells. When the bell of the First Presbyterian Church rang announcing masses or marking the hours, the girl entered a state of absolute despair. She threw herself under the bed or hid in the closet, covering her ears and rocking back and forth, emitting low moans that broke the heart of anyone who witnessed it. "Something related to the church has traumatized her deeply," Richard said to Carol after the third such episode. "And I have a very clear idea of what it might have been." Carol, who had initially accepted Lily's presence out of compassion and the girl's desperate condition, was beginning to feel overwhelmed by the intensity of the care required. The domestic environment had become tense and unpredictable, and she felt that she was losing control over her own home. The situation became even more complicated when neighbors started asking questions. Mrs. Davison, who lived next door, had noticed strange movements and the presence of an unknown child. During a conversation at the fence, she questioned Carol directly about the little visitor who was staying at the house. "She's not a visitor, Mrs. Davison. It's a temporary situation," Carol replied evasively, but she knew that the neighbor's curiosity would not be easily satisfied. "Temporary how? Isn't the girl going to school? Doesn't she have family looking for her?" Mrs. Davison's insistence made Carol uncomfortable, as those were exactly the questions she herself asked Richard without receiving satisfactory answers. The neighborhood gossip reached the ears of other people, and soon the whole street was commenting on the Hardings' strange situation. Some speculated that they had bought a child, others suggested that Richard was having mental problems. The versions multiplied and distorted with each conversation, creating a social pressure that Carol felt intensely with each trip to the grocery store or walk down the street. "Richard, we can't continue like this," she said one night, after Lily had finally fallen asleep. "People are talking, asking questions I don't know how to answer, and the girl, she needs professional help, not two lay people trying to guess how to deal with traumas we don't even understand." "She's better off here than she was on the street," Richard replied, but his voice carried a defensiveness that revealed his own doubts. "Better physically, yes, but emotionally, Richard, she doesn't speak, doesn't play, doesn't act like a normal child. She spends hours looking out the window as if she expects someone to come looking for her. And when that happens, when her family shows up, when the authorities find out that we are with a child without documents, without legal explanation for her presence here." Carol's words echoed in Richard's mind because he knew she was right. His decision had been impulsive, driven by guilt and compassion, but he had not considered the practical and legal implications of his choice. how to explain to the authorities that he had informally adopted a street child, how to prove that his intentions were genuine and there was nothing suspicious in the situation. It was during this tense conversation that they heard a noise coming from Lily's room. When they ran to check, they found the girl awake, sitting on the bed, looking directly at them. For the first time since arriving at the house, she did not seem scared or confused. Her eyes showed a lucidity that surprised them. Lily rose slowly and walked to Richard, stopping right in front of him. Then, to the couple's astonishment, she raised her small hand and gently touched the man's face, as if trying to communicate something that she could not express with words. "She understands what we're saying," Carol whispered, moved by that moment of connection. Richard knelt down to be at Lily's height and looked her in the eyes. "Do you want to stay here with us?" he asked softly. The answer came not in words, but in actions. Lily nodded her head and, for the first time since arriving, gave something that resembled a smile. It was weak and hesitant, but it was genuine. At that moment, both Richard and Carol realized that their decision had already been made, regardless of the complications that might arise. That child had found in them a security that she probably had never known, and they had found in her a purpose that they did not know they were looking for. However, the next morning, reality came knocking on the door when Carol received an unexpected call. It was Monica, her 22-year-old daughter, announcing that she had finished her last semester of psychology in the capital and would return home next week to celebrate graduation with the family. "That's great, honey. I've missed you," Carol said, but her voice carried a concern that Monica immediately picked up on. "Mom, is something wrong?" "You seem strange." Carol looked at Richard, who watched the conversation with a tense expression. How to explain to her daughter, newly graduated in psychology and full of theories about human behavior and appropriate procedures, that they were illegally sheltering a traumatized child about whom they knew nothing? "No, honey, everything is fine. I'm just looking forward to seeing you," Carol lied, but she knew that Monica, with her academic training and questioning personality, would not be as easily convinced as the curious neighbors. When she hung up the phone, the silence in the house seemed heavier than before. Monica's arrival would bring a new perspective to the situation, but also represented another complication in a story that was already becoming too complex to be sustained indefinitely. Richard looked at Lily, who was playing quietly on the living room floor with some makeshift toys that Carol had given her, and wondered how many other surprises and challenges would arise before they could find a definitive solution to that situation that had begun with an act of compassion, but that was turning into something much bigger and more complicated than he could ever have imagined. Monica arrived on a Thursday afternoon, carrying 2 suitcases and a diploma, representing 4 years of intensive study in psychology. At 22, she had inherited her father's determination and her mother's practical sensitivity, but had also developed a critical eye sharpened by her academic training, which made her question behaviors and situations with an almost scientific objectivity. When she got off the bus at the Harmony Creek bus station, Monica immediately noticed something different in her parents' behavior. Richard seemed too nervous, talking fast about trivial matters, while Carol avoided prolonged eye contact and answered questions with unconvincing evasions. "You guys are acting weird," she commented during the ride home. "Did something happen while I was away?" "Nothing much, honey. Just the normal work stresses," Richard replied, but his hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. When they arrived at the house, Monica immediately noticed subtle changes in the organization of the environment. There were toys scattered around the living room, extra dishes in the kitchen sink, and a different smell in the air, not unpleasant, but definitely unfamiliar. Her instincts as a newly graduated psychologist began to work, cataloging inconsistencies that her parents were trying to disguise. It was when she went up to her room to unpack that she saw Lily for the first time. The girl was at the window of the guest room, watching the street with that constant attention that had become her hallmark. When she realized she was being watched, Lily turned slowly and faced Monica with her big, expressive eyes. "Mom! Dad!" Monica's voice echoed through the house with a mixture of surprise and indignation. "Can you explain to me who this child is?" The silence that followed was so intense that it seemed to echo through the walls of the house. Richard and Carol exchanged glances downstairs, knowing that the moment of truth had arrived. There was no longer any way to avoid explanations or postpone the conversation they had feared for a week. "Monica, come down here, please." "We need to talk," Carol said, her voice laden with a tension that her daughter immediately picked up on. During the next hour, Richard told Monica the whole story. The incident with the priest, the obsessive search, the encounter with Lily sick under the bridge, and the impulsive decision to bring her home. Monica listened to everything in silence, but her expression became increasingly worried with each detail revealed. "Dad, do you realize what you've done?" she asked when Richard finished the story. "You took a child off the street without legal authorization, without knowing her story, without verifying whether she has a family looking for her. From a legal point of view, this can be characterized as kidnapping." "Kidnapping?" Richard stood up abruptly. "I saved her life. She was dying. I understand your intentions, Dad, but intentions don't change the legal implications of the situation." Monica took on a professional tone that irritated both Richard and Carol. "And, in addition to legal issues, there are psychological issues. A child with this level of trauma needs specialized care, not good intentions from lay people. So you think we should have let her die on the street?" Carol's voice came out louder than normal, revealing the accumulated tension of the last weeks. "I think you should have called the competent authorities from the first moment. Child protective services, social workers, professionals trained to deal with situations like this, and hand her over to the same system that allowed her to get into that state." Richard began to walk around the room, his agitation increasing. "Monica, you studied psychology in books. I saw the real despair of a child who was thrown in the trash as if she was worthless. Dad, precisely because I studied, I know that good intentions are not enough to heal complex traumas. This girl needs professional help." The discussion was interrupted when Lily appeared at the entrance to the room, her eyes fixed on the new person who was causing so much commotion. She watched Monica with the same cautious attention that she paid to everything, but there was something different in her posture, a curiosity that she had not shown for a long time. Monica, in turn, was impressed to see Lily up close. The child was smaller and thinner than she expected. Her hair had been cut and cleaned by Carol, but there was still a fragility in her entire appearance that touched the young psychologist's heart. "Hi," Monica said softly, crouching down to be at Lily's height. "My name is Monica. What's your name?" Lily did not answer, but continued to watch Monica with interest. There was something in the young woman's tone of voice that was different from her parents', less charged with emotion and guilt, more neutral and safe. "She doesn't speak," Carol explained. "Since she arrived here, she hasn't said a single word." Monica studied Lily's behavior for a few minutes, noting details that her parents, moved by emotion, had not noticed. The way the girl positioned her body always close to an exit, how her eyes constantly scanned the environment, how she maintained a specific distance from each person. All were classic signs of complex trauma. "Can I try a different approach?" Monica asked, taking a pad of paper and coloring pencils from her bag. Sometimes non-verbal communication is more effective with traumatized children. Richard was going to protest, arguing that Lily was not a subject of study, but Carol held his arm. Perhaps her daughter, with her academic knowledge, could really help where they had failed. Monica sat on the floor and began to draw simple shapes on the paper. A house, a tree, a sun. Lily approached slowly, her curiosity overcoming her usual caution. When Monica offered the pencil, the girl hesitated for a moment before accepting it. What happened next left everyone present in silence. Lily began to draw with surprising precision and detail for a 4-year-old. But they were not common childish drawings. They were disturbing images that portrayed situations of fear and isolation. A small figure locked in dark spaces, large menacing hands, and repeatedly the image of a man in dark clothes who seemed to represent a constant source of terror. "My God," Carol whispered, seeing for the first time a visual representation of what Lily had experienced. Monica continued to observe the drawings with professional attention, but internally she felt her heart clench. Each stroke revealed a child who had been exposed to situations that no human being, much less a child, should face. "Dad, Mom," she said finally, her voice softer than before. "You're right about one thing. This girl can't go back to the system that allowed this to happen to her, but you also can't continue dealing with this alone." "What are you suggesting?" Richard asked. "That we find a legal way to keep Lily here while she receives appropriate psychological treatment. But that means facing legal issues, investigating her past, and possibly confronting people who won't like having their secrets exposed." At that moment, as if responding to the conversation, Lily looked up from the drawing and looked directly at Monica. For the first time since arriving at the Hardings' house, she gave something that genuinely resembled a smile. "She trusts you," Carol observed, moved. "It's a start," Monica replied, but she knew that they were only scratching the surface of a situation much more complex and dangerous than any of them imagined. Lily's drawings suggested that there were specific people responsible for her suffering, and exposing these secrets could put the entire Harding family in a vulnerable position that they did not yet fully understand. The following days brought a change in the dynamics of the Hardings' house. Monica had decided to postpone her return to the capital and spend a few weeks at home, officially to rest after graduation, but in reality to work discreetly with Lily. She transformed part of her room into an improvised therapeutic space where she developed non-verbal communication activities with the girl. During these sessions, Lily showed remarkable progress. She began to respond to simple gestures, organized objects according to visual instructions, and most importantly, continued to produce increasingly detailed drawings that revealed fragments of her traumatic history. "Dad, I need to show you something," Monica said one morning, entering the office where Richard was trying to catch up on the company's paperwork. "Lily's drawings are forming a disturbing pattern." Monica spread a series of drawings that Lily had made during the week on the table. All portrayed the same male figure in dark clothes, always in positions of authority or threat over smaller figures. But in one of the most recent drawings, there were details that made Richard swallow hard. "Look here," Monica pointed to a specific drawing. She drew the man dressed in something that looks a lot like a cassock. And here, in this other one, there is a structure that resembles a church. Richard studied the drawings with growing unease. The connection that he had suspected from the beginning was becoming increasingly evident through Lily's art. "This confirms what you witnessed that day," Monica continued, "but it suggests that her trauma with religious figures is much deeper than a single incident. Dad, this child may have been systematically abused. So what do we do now? I can't simply accuse a priest based on drawings by a 4-year-old. "No, but we can investigate. I need you to tell me everything you know about this Father Michael, and I also need you to help me find out where exactly Lily came from." Richard hesitated for a moment. During the weeks of obsessive searching for the girl, he had avoided asking deeper questions about her origins, focusing only on finding her and ensuring her safety. But now he realized that this intentional ignorance could be preventing Lily from receiving the justice she deserved. "I know she ran away from St. Jude's orphanage. It's about 2 hours from here," he said finally. "Have you been there yet?" "No. I was afraid they would try to take her back." Monica was silent for a few moments, processing the implications. Dad, if we really want to help Lily, we need to face these issues. We can't live indefinitely in this irregular situation, and she can't heal completely without confronting her past. That afternoon, while Carol took care of Lily, Richard and Monica made the trip to St. Jude's orphanage. What they found was an old and poorly maintained building, located on the outskirts of a town even smaller than Harmony Creek. The peeling facade and unkempt gardens suggested an institution that operated with limited resources and minimal supervision. The director, a 50-year-old woman named Sister Agnes, greeted them with an expression that mixed curiosity and defensiveness. When Richard mentioned that they were interested in information about a child who had run away from the institution, the change in her behavior was immediate. "We do not discuss specific cases of children with unauthorized people," she said dryly. "If you have information about a missing child, you should report it to the competent authorities." "We understand the policy," Monica intervened, using her most professional tone. "But we are concerned about the well-being of a specific child who may have experienced traumatic situations during her stay here." "All our children receive adequate care and constant supervision," Sister Agnes replied, but her excessive defensiveness suggested exactly the opposite. "What about Father Michael? We understand that he makes regular visits here," Richard asked, watching the director's reaction closely. The mention of the priest's name caused a visible change in Sister Agnes's expression. She turned pale, and her hands trembled slightly before she managed to control herself. "Father Michael is our chaplain and a respected figure in the community. I will not tolerate insinuations against his reputation," she said, but her voice lacked the previous conviction. It was at this moment that a younger employee, who was organizing papers near the reception desk, approached discreetly. She had overheard the conversation and seemed to be struggling against an impulse to speak. "Sister, can I finish organizing those documents in the storage room?" she asked, casting a meaningful look at Richard and Monica. "Of course, Sister Teresa. You may go." When Sister Agnes walked away to attend to another matter, Teresa made a discreet sign for Richard and Monica to follow her to a more secluded area of the building. "You're asking about Lily, aren't you?" she whispered, looking nervously around. "Do you know her?" Monica asked, trying to contain her anxiety. "Of course I know her. She was here since she was a baby. A sweet child, but always very scared." Teresa paused, as if deciding how much to reveal. "You said she ran away?" "Yes, a few months ago." "Thank God," Teresa murmured, and then hurried to explain. I hope she's okay, but this place wasn't safe for her." "Why wasn't it safe?" Richard asked, feeling his heart race. Teresa looked around again before answering. "Father Michael, he had a special attention for her. He always asked for her to be taken to private spiritual guidance sessions. Lily always came back from these sessions very shaken, sometimes crying for days. And you never reported this? Who were we going to report to? He's the official chaplain. He has authority from the diocese. And Sister Agnes, well, she always said that we were imagining things." Monica exchanged a meaningful look with her father. "Teresa, do you know anything about Lily's origin? How did she get here?" "It's strange you ask that," Teresa said, lowering her voice even further. "Because the records about her have always been confusing. Normally, we have detailed information about how each child arrived here, but in Lily's case, there was only a note saying that she was delivered by a local family for reasons beyond their control." "What family?" "We never knew for sure, but I heard rumors that there was a gold medallion that came with her, something with an engraving. Father Michael kept the object, said it would be better for the child to forget the past." Richard felt as if pieces of a puzzle were falling into place, forming a much more sinister picture than he had imagined. "Teresa, do you remember any more details about this medallion?" "I didn't see it personally, but another employee commented that it had initials engraved. Something like VS or SV, I don't remember well. When they left the orphanage, Richard and Monica made the trip back in silence, each processing the disturbing revelations they had just heard. Lily's situation was much more complex than they imagined, and now they had concrete evidence that she had been a victim of systematic abuse. "Dad, we need to make a decision," Monica said when they approached the town. "With this information, we can no longer ignore the legal implications. We have to report what we discovered, and risk taking Lily back to that system, or risk that other children continue to suffer what she suffered." It was a moral dilemma that had no easy answers. But when they arrived home and saw Lily playing quietly in the garden with Carol, they both knew that they would do anything to protect her, even if it meant facing consequences that they could not yet fully foresee. "There's something else, Dad," Monica said as they watched Lily. "Those initials that Teresa mentioned, they may be the key to discovering who Lily's real parents are. And if we can find that medallion—" At that moment, as if feeling that she was being watched, Lily looked up and waved to them. But there was something in her expression, a shadow of sadness that did not match the peaceful moment, that made Richard realize that the girl carried secrets much deeper than any of them suspected. The discovery of the initials VS on the missing medallion consumed Richard's thoughts during the following days. He spent hours in his home office, surfing the internet and making discreet calls to acquaintances in other cities, trying to find any clue about a family with those initials that could be linked to Lily. Monica, in turn, continued her daily sessions with the girl, who showed remarkable progress. Lily had begun to emit some sounds, not words yet, but murmurs and sighs that indicated a gradual attempt at verbal communication. More importantly, she had begun to show signs of trust, actively seeking Monica's company and even initiating spontaneous physical contact. It was during one of these sessions that something unexpected happened. Monica was showing Lily photographs of different professions, doctors, teachers, firefighters, as part of a recognition exercise, when she came to a photo of a priest celebrating Mass. Lily's reaction was immediate and intense. She began to tremble, pushed the photo away, and hid under the table, emitting anguished sounds. "Lily, it's okay," Monica said softly, crouching beside the table. "The photo is gone. You are safe." But this time, something different happened. Instead of remaining silent as she always did during these episodes, Lily began to whisper something. Monica moved closer, trying to decipher the almost inaudible words. "Bad priest. Bad priest. He hurts Lily." Lily's first words in months were a clear and devastating accusation. Monica felt tears in her eyes but maintained her professional composure while consoling the girl. "Lily, can you tell me where the bad priest hurt you?" she asked gently. "Priest's house, dark, Lily alone. He shouts, he hurts." The words came out fragmented, interspersed with sobs, but each phrase was a crucial piece of the puzzle. "Lily spoke!" Carol's voice came from the door, where she had stopped upon hearing the murmurs coming from the room. "Richard, come quick! Lily is talking!" When Richard came running, he found Lily still hiding under the table, but now babbling disjointed words about dark places, men in black, and a lot of fear. It was simultaneously a moment of joy because she was finally communicating, and of horror for the revelations that her words brought. "Monica, is this enough for a formal complaint?" Richard asked in a low voice. "The testimony of a traumatized 4-year-old is legally complicated," Monica replied, "but combined with what we discovered at the orphanage and what you witnessed, yes, we have grounds for an investigation." That afternoon, while Lily rested after the emotionally exhausting episode, Richard made a decision that he had been postponing for weeks. He called the family's lawyer, Dr. Thompson, and scheduled an urgent meeting to discuss the legal situation they were in. Dr. Thompson, a 60-year-old man with decades of experience in family law, listened to the whole story with an increasingly grave expression. When Richard finished the account, including the most recent revelations about Father Michael and Lily's first words, the lawyer was silent for a long moment. "Richard, do you realize that you are in a legally very delicate situation?" he said finally. "Technically, you have informal custody of a child without legal authorization. This can be interpreted as kidnapping. But she was abandoned, dying on the street. I understand, and your intentions are clearly honorable, but the law is specific about these procedures. You should have contacted Child Protective Services immediately." Richard felt the weight of legal reality bearing down on him. "And now? What can we do?" "Two options," Dr. Thompson explained. "First, you can contact Child Protective Services voluntarily, explain the situation, and hope that they recognize your good intentions. Second, we can try an emergency custody process based on the state of abandonment in which you found the child and the evidence of prior abuse." "What about the accusations against the priest? That's a separate but equally complex issue. Accusing a member of the clergy requires very solid evidence, especially in a small town where he probably has considerable influence." While Richard struggled with these legal issues, Monica made a discovery that would completely change the course of their investigations. She had decided to search the internet for traditional families in the region with the initials VS, when she came across a news story from 5 years ago that made her heart stop. "Disappearance of young woman from the Smith family worries the local community," read the headline of a regional newspaper. The article reported the disappearance of Valerie Smith, 17, the only daughter of a wealthy family who had moved to Albany after an unspecified family tragedy. Monica read and reread the news, paying attention to every detail. Valerie Smith had disappeared around the same time that Lily had appeared at the orphanage. The Smith family was traditionally Catholic and had made substantial donations to several churches in the region, including the First Presbyterian Church of Harmony Creek. "V.S. Valerie Smith," Monica murmured, feeling that she was on the trail of something much bigger. She continued researching and discovered more disturbing information. The Smith family had left the region abruptly, selling all their properties in a matter of weeks. The local newspapers only had vague mentions of family issues and a need for privacy during a difficult time. But it was in an online genealogy forum that Monica found the information confirming her suspicions. An anonymous user had posted years ago, looking for information about Valerie Smith, mentioning that she had passed away during childbirth and that there were unresolved questions about the child's fate. "Dad!" Monica shouted, running downstairs with the laptop in her hands. "I need you to see this." Richard was in the living room, still processing the conversation with the lawyer, when Monica showed him her findings. The possibility that Lily was Valerie Smith's daughter created a new dimension to the entire situation. "If this is true," Richard said slowly, "it means the Smith family may have legal rights to Lily. Or it means they know exactly what happened to Valerie and why Lily ended up at St. Jude's orphanage," Monica replied. "Dad, if the Smith family still lives in Albany, we need to find them. What if they don't want the truth to come out? What if there are secrets they'd rather keep buried?" It was a question neither of them knew how to answer. But that night, as they watched Lily sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks, they both knew they had reached a point of no return. The truth about the girl's past was within their reach, but discovering it could put not only Lily, but the entire Harding family in a much more dangerous situation than they imagined. The next morning, Carol made a discovery that added another layer of urgency to the situation. She had gone to the grocery store when their neighbor, Mrs. Davison, approached her with a worried expression. "Carol, a man came by yesterday asking about you. He said he was from Child Protective Services and wanted to know about the child staying at your house." Carol's blood ran cold. "What kind of questions did he ask?" He wanted to know how long she'd been with you, if she had any documents, things like that. I didn't say anything, of course, but he seemed very interested. When Carol told Richard and Monica, the couple realized their time was running out. Somehow, the authorities had found out about Lily, and now they needed to act quickly before the situation spiraled completely out of control. "We have to find the Smith family before Child Protective Services takes any action," Monica said urgently. "It's our only chance to protect Lily and discover the truth about what really happened." The trip to Albany was decided in a matter of hours. Richard cancelled all his appointments, Monica packed a small bag, and Carol was responsible for taking care of Lily, who couldn't accompany them on this first investigation. The tension in the house was palpable. Everyone knew they were racing against time before Child Protective Services took any official action. "If anyone comes asking about us, say we've traveled to resolve urgent family matters," Richard instructed his wife. "And if they ask specifically about Lily, I'll say she's our niece visiting for a few days," Carol completed, though her voice showed little conviction in the effectiveness of this explanation. During the 3-hour drive to the state capital, Richard and Monica discussed strategies for locating the Smith family. Monica had obtained an address through online searches, but they didn't know if it was still current or if the family would be willing to talk about such a sensitive subject. The address led them to an upscale neighborhood in Albany, where imposing houses hid behind high walls and electronic gates. The Smith residence was particularly impressive. A modern 3-story construction with manicured lawns and an entrance that suggested prosperity and privacy. "I don't know if it was a good idea to come here unannounced," Monica murmured as they approached the gate. "If we'd warned them, they might refuse to see us," Richard replied, pressing the doorbell button. The voice that answered through the intercom was that of an older woman, probably a housekeeper. "Smith residence? Good morning." "Good morning, my name is Richard Harding. I'm from Harmony Creek. I'd like to speak with Mr. and Mrs. Smith about a matter related to Valerie." The silence that followed lasted so long that they began to wonder if the connection had been lost. Finally, the voice returned, more cautious. "Please wait a moment." Almost 10 minutes passed before the gate opened, revealing a man of approximately 60 years old, well-dressed, but with an expression of extreme tension on his face. His grey hair was perfectly groomed, but there was something in his eyes that suggested years of carefully hidden suffering. "I am Victor Smith," he said, his voice controlled but laden with emotion. "You mentioned my daughter. What do you want to know about Valerie?" "Mr. Smith, we believe we have important information about what happened to her, and possibly about your granddaughter," Richard replied, carefully observing the man's reaction. Victor Smith paled visibly. "Come in," he said after a moment, "but know that this is a very painful subject for our family." The interior of the house was elegant but cold, decorated with expensive furniture that seemed more functional than welcoming. Victor led them to a formal living room, where a woman of approximately 55 years old awaited them. Her red and swollen eyes suggested she had been crying recently. "This is my wife, Agnes," Victor said. "Agnes, these are the people who said they have information about Valerie." "How do you know about our daughter?" Agnes asked, her voice trembling. She's been gone for 5 years." Monica and Richard exchanged a significant look. The phrasing "been gone" was ambiguous, but confirmed that something definitive had happened to Valerie. "Mrs. Smith," Monica began gently, "we believe your daughter may have had a child before she passed, and that child is still alive." The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Agnes covered her face with her hands and began to cry, while Victor stood up abruptly and began to pace the room. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his agitation suggested the exact opposite. "Valerie was just a child. She didn't have children." "Mr. Smith," Richard insisted, "we found a girl of approximately 4 years old who was abandoned at St. Jude's orphanage around the same time Valerie disappeared. She had a locket with the initials V.S. "The locket!" Agnes cried, looking up suddenly. "Victor, they know about the locket." "Agnes, be quiet," her husband ordered, but it was too late. "What locket, Mrs. Smith?" Monica asked softly. Agnes looked nervously at her husband before answering. "It was a family locket that I gave to Valerie when she turned 15. It had a special engraving, 'To our little Hope, V.S.' "And where is that locket now?" Richard asked. "We don't know," Victor replied quickly. "It disappeared along with Valerie. Or it was given along with the child to the orphanage," Monica suggested, observing the couple's reactions. The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Victor and Agnes looked at each other as if they were waging a silent battle over how much to reveal. "Mr. Smith," Richard said finally, "I know this is a painful subject, but an innocent child is involved. If Valerie had a daughter, that girl has a right to know her true origin." "And you have this child?" Agnes asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "We are taking care of her temporarily. She was in a very difficult situation." "What is she like?" Agnes asked, tears streaming down her face. "What does she look like?" Monica showed her a photo she had discreetly taken of Lily playing in the garden. Agnes's reaction was instant. She let out a loud sob and grabbed the photo with trembling hands. "It's her! Victor! She's the spitting image of Valerie when she was little. Look at the eyes, the shape of her face." Victor looked at the photo for a long moment, and when he looked up, there were tears in them too. "My God, she's alive! Our granddaughter is alive!" "So you admit that Valerie had a daughter?" Richard asked. "Admit!" Victor shouted suddenly, all his composure crumbling. "Do you think this was easy for us? Valerie was 17 years old. She was our only daughter. When we found out she was pregnant, we tried everything to keep her safe, to protect her from scandal." "What happened to her?" Monica asked softly. Agnes sobbed before answering. "Complications during childbirth. The doctors said she was too young, that her body wasn't prepared. We did everything, hired the best doctors, but we couldn't save her. And the child. She survived," Victor said, his voice broken. "But we couldn't look at her without seeing Valerie. It was too late, too young. And there was the scandal, what people would say about our family." "So you gave her to the orphanage," Richard concluded, trying to keep the judgment out of his voice. "It was the hardest decision of our lives," Agnes said defensively. "We thought she would have a better life, that she would find a family that could love her as she deserved." "Did you know about the conditions at the orphanage? About what was happening there?" Monica asked. "What kind of conditions?" Victor asked, frowning. "The child was abused, Mr. Smith, systematically for years. She developed severe trauma that she's still trying to overcome." The revelation hit the couple like a physical blow. Agnes began to cry convulsively, while Victor sat down heavily, as if his legs could no longer support him. "We didn't know," he murmured. "We made generous donations. We thought she was being well cared for. Father Michael assured us that—" "Father Michael," Richard interrupted, his heart pounding. "He was the one who helped us with the arrangements. He said he knew a suitable institution, that he would take care of everything discreetly. And you never tried to check on her?" "We tried once, 2 years ago," Agnes admitted, "but the priest said it would be better for the child if there was no contact with the past, that she had adapted well, and that our presence would only confuse her." Richard and Monica exchanged meaningful glances. Father Michael had not only abused Lily, he had orchestrated the entire situation, keeping her isolated from her true family and using her for his own sinister purposes. "Mr. Smith," Richard said finally, "your granddaughter is in danger. Father Michael wasn't protecting her. He was abusing her. And now that we've discovered the truth, we need to ensure that she's safe and that she receives the justice she deserves." "What do you want from us?" Victor asked, his voice almost inaudible. "We want you to help us protect Lily. That's the name she received at the orphanage. and we want you to help us expose what Father Michael did so that no other child goes through what she went through." It was at that moment that Richard's phone rang. It was Carol, and her voice was laden with panic. "Richard, you need to come back immediately. Child Protective Services was here with a court order. They want to take Lily tomorrow morning." Carol's call transformed the meeting at the Smith house into a crisis situation. Richard hung up the phone with trembling hands, while Monica watched the expression of panic that had taken over her father's face. "What happened?" Victor Smith asked, noticing the dramatic shift in the mood of the conversation. "Child Protective Services has a court order to remove Lily from our house tomorrow morning," Richard explained, running his hands over his face. "We have less than 24 hours to resolve this situation." "My God," Agnes murmured, grabbing her husband's arm. "They're going to take her back to that terrible place?" "Not necessarily," Monica said, trying to remain calm, "but they'll probably place her in a temporary foster home while they investigate the situation. The problem is that this could take months, and during that time she'll be separated from all of us." Victor Smith stood up abruptly, a sudden determination taking over his expression. "We're not going to allow that. She's our granddaughter, our blood. We have legal rights to her." "Mr. Smith," Richard said carefully, "you officially relinquished those rights when you gave her to the orphanage. Legally, the situation is much more complicated." "Then what do we do?" Agnes asked, her voice filled with despair. Monica had an idea. "We can try a three-pronged strategy. First, you, as biological grandparents, file for emergency guardianship. Second, we provide all the evidence of abuse that we've collected to prove that she cannot return to the previous system. Third, we confront Father Michael publicly with our findings." "Confronting the priest could be dangerous," Victor warned. "He has a lot of influence in the region. He could deny everything and even accuse us of defamation." "That's why we need irrefutable evidence," Richard replied, "and I have an idea how to get it." The drive back to Harmony Creek was made in 2 cars, Richard and Monica in the first, followed by Victor and Agnes Smith. During the journey, they developed a risky but necessary plan to protect Lily and expose the truth about Father Michael. When they arrived at the Harding house, it was already night. Carol was waiting anxiously, with Lily sleeping in her arms. The girl had become extremely agitated after the visit from Child Protective Services, as if she instinctively sensed that something threatened her newfound safety. "How did she react when the caseworkers were here?" Monica asked, watching Lily sleep. "It was terrible," Carol replied, tears in her eyes. "When she saw the uniforms, she hid under the stairs and didn't come out for hours. She kept repeating, 'Bad men,' until she fell asleep from exhaustion." The presence of Victor and Agnes brought a new dynamic to the situation. When Lily woke up the next morning and saw 2 strangers in the house, her initial reaction was fear, but something about Agnes seemed to awaken a deep and inexplicable memory. "She has Valerie's eyes," Agnes whispered, watching Lily hide behind Carol. "And the same birthmark on her left wrist that my daughter had." It was Monica who had the idea to show Lily an old photo of Valerie as a child. The girl's reaction was surprising. She took the photo carefully, studied the face for a long moment, and then looked directly at Agnes. "Mommy," she said softly, the first word she directed to someone in the Smith family. "No, honey," Agnes corrected gently, tears streaming down her face. "I'm Grandma, your mommy. Your mommy is in heaven now." Lily's intuitive understanding of the family connection was impressive for a child of her age. She slowly approached Agnes, and to everyone's surprise, initiated a spontaneous hug. "Good, Grandma?" she asked, using her still limited language. "Very good," Agnes replied, hugging the granddaughter she was meeting for the first time. "Grandma will take care of you." But the emotional moment was interrupted by the arrival of 2 official cars in front of the house. Through the window, they could see Child Protective Services uniforms and what appeared to be a court officer. "They're here," Richard said, checking his watch. "It's only 8 in the morning. They came early on purpose." "What do we do now?" Carol asked, instinctively positioning herself in front of Lily. "Now we put our plan into action," Victor Smith replied, taking out some documents he had brought from Albany. The doorbell rang, and when Richard opened the door, he found 3 people, a social worker from Child Protective Services, a court officer, and, to his surprise and horror, Father Michael. "Mr. Harding," said the social worker, a middle-aged woman named Dr. Fernandez, "we are here to remove the minor who is under your illegal care. We have a court order, and I am here to ensure that the child's spiritual interests are preserved during this transition," added Father Michael, his cold eyes studying Richard's face. "Interesting that you're here, Father," Richard said, allowing them to enter, "because we have some important questions to ask you." It was at that moment that Lily saw the priest. Her reaction was immediate and visceral. She let out a scream of pure terror and ran to hide behind the sofa, trembling convulsively. "Bad father, bad father!" she screamed, her first clear words echoing through the room like a devastating accusation. Dr. Fernandez observed the reaction with professional attention. "Interesting. The child seems to have a specific aversion to Father Michael. It's just the natural fear of children traumatized by authority figures," the priest said quickly, but there was sweat on his forehead. "She needs proper spiritual guidance." "Actually," Victor Smith intervened, introducing himself for the first time, "she needs the care of her biological family." The revelation that Lily's grandparents were present completely changed the dynamics of the situation. Victor presented documents proving Valerie's parentage and his own identity, as well as an emergency guardianship petition that had been filed overnight through lawyers in Albany. "Mr. Smith," said Dr. Fernandez, studying the documents, "these are significant developments. But we still need to understand why the child was under the Hardings' irregular care. Because she was being abused in the system that was supposed to protect her," Monica said, presenting all the evidence they had collected. Lily's drawings, Sister Teresa's testimony, the inconsistencies in the orphanage records. Father Michael became visibly nervous when the evidence was presented. "These are serious and unfounded accusations against a respectable institution and against my person," he said, but his voice had lost its previous authority. "So you deny that you held private sessions with Lily at the orphanage?" Richard asked directly. "I offered spiritual guidance to all the children in the institution, and you deny that you confiscated a gold locket that belonged to the child? I don't know what you're talking about." It was at that moment that Agnes stood up and faced the priest directly. "Father Michael, you told us 5 years ago that you would take good care of our granddaughter. You assured us that she would be safe and happy. How do you explain the state in which we found her?" "Mrs. Smith," the priest replied, clearly uncomfortable, "I cannot be held responsible for every aspect of care. But you can be held responsible for the abuse you committed against her," Monica interrupted, showing Lily's more specific drawings detailing situations of abuse. Dr. Fernandez studied the drawings with growing concern. As an experienced professional, she recognized clear signs of trauma in children's artistic representations. "Father Michael," she said finally, "I believe a formal investigation into your activities at St. Jude's Orphanage will be necessary. In the meantime, the child definitely cannot return to that environment." "What about our situation?" Victor Smith asked. "Considering that you are the biological grandparents and have a guardianship petition filed, as well as the evidence that the child was removed from a situation of abuse by the Hardings, I believe we can establish a temporary arrangement while the legal issues are resolved." Father Michael tried to protest, but his position had become untenable. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and the presence of Lily's biological family completely changed the legal aspect of the situation. "This is not the last word on this matter," he said as he left, but there was more despair than threat in his words. When the door closed behind the authorities, the house was silent for a moment. Lily slowly emerged from her hiding place and looked around, realizing that the bad father was gone. "He's gone?" she asked, her voice still trembling. "Yes, and he won't bother you any more," Richard promised, picking her up in his arms. But everyone knew that this had only been the first battle in a much longer and more complex war for Lily's safety and the justice she deserved. The days following the confrontation with Father Michael brought an illusory sense of victory, but also revealed the complexity of the consequences that their actions had unleashed. Lily remained in the Harding home under a supervised temporary arrangement while the legal processes followed their slow and bureaucratic course. Victor and Agnes Smith had rented a small house in Harmony Creek to stay close to their granddaughter during the transition period. The adaptation was not easy for anyone involved. Lily, although she showed affection for her grandparents, still saw Richard and Carol as her primary parental figures, creating a complex family dynamic that required constant care. "She doesn't understand why there are so many adults wanting to take care of her," Monica observed during a session with Lily. "For a child who spent so much time abandoned, having multiple people claiming responsibility over her is confusing and even frightening." Monica had noticed that Lily was regressing in some aspects of her recovery. She had returned to having frequent nightmares, this time not only about the priest, but about being separated from the people she loved. The girl had developed intense separation anxiety, refusing to be alone even for a few minutes. "Lily doesn't want to go," she said one morning when Agnes came to pick her up for a walk. "Lily stays with Mommy Carol." The statement broke Agnes's heart, as she struggled to establish a bond with her granddaughter while respecting the ties she had already formed. "Honey, Grandma just wants to get to know you better," Agnes said gently. "We're not going to take you away." But Lily clung to Carol's legs, her big eyes filled with tears. "Don't want to go. Stay here. Emily here." The situation became even more complicated when worrying news arrived about the investigation of Father Michael. Dr. Thompson, the family's lawyer, brought information that completely changed the perspective on what they were facing. "The diocese is protecting the priest," he explained during a meeting at the Harding house. "They've transferred him to a parish in another state, claiming he needs spiritual rest due to the stress of the unfounded accusations." "Unfounded?" Richard exploded. "We have clear evidence of what he did." "Evidence they are questioning. They say that the drawings of a traumatized child do not constitute sufficient legal proof, and that Sister Teresa's testimony is from a disgruntled employee who was fired for other reasons." "And Lily's reaction when she saw the priest?" Monica asked. "They argue that it may be a conditioned reaction influenced by the adults who were caring for her." Victor Smith slammed his fist on the table. "This is absurd. They are protecting a criminal." "More than that," Dr. Thompson continued. "The diocese is considering suing you for defamation. They have considerable resources and influence." The legal threat brought a new dimension of stress to the entire family. Richard began to receive threatening calls from people who identified themselves as faithful concerned about the attacks on the church. Some customers of his dealerships cancelled contracts, citing moral issues with the accusations against a man of God. "We are being persecuted for doing the right thing," Carol said one night after someone had thrown stones at the living room window. But it was Lily who brought an unexpected twist to the situation. During one of her sessions with Monica, she made a drawing different from all the previous ones. Instead of the dark and terrifying images that characterized her representations of trauma, she drew something specific and detailed. A room with bookshelves, a large table, and a small box hidden behind the books. "Lily, can you tell me about this drawing?" Monica asked gently. "Bad father's room," Lily replied, pointing to the drawing. He keeps bad things in the little box. What kind of bad things? Lily picked up another pencil and drew what appeared to be photographs scattered on the table. Pictures of children. Bad father likes to look. Monica's blood ran cold. If Lily was describing what she thought she was, it meant that there was physical evidence of the priest's crimes, evidence that he kept hidden in his office. Lily, do you remember where this room is? Father's house, near the big church. Monica immediately took this information to Dr. Thompson and to her parents. The possibility that there was physical evidence of the crimes completely changed the legal situation. If we get that evidence, the diocese can no longer protect him, Dr. Thompson said. But there's a problem. We'd need a search warrant, and with the influence they have, getting that will be very difficult. What if we can't get it through legal means? Richard asked, his frustration evident. Richard, any evidence obtained illegally would be inadmissible in court, Dr. Thompson warned. Besides, you could be sued for trespassing. It was at that moment that Victor Smith made a proposal that surprised everyone. What if I go talk to the bishop responsible for the diocese? As someone who has made substantial donations to the church, maybe he will see me. That's risky, Monica said. If he's involved in protecting the priest, you'll be exposing yourself. It's a risk I'm willing to take for my granddaughter. 3 days later, Victor returned from his meeting with the bishop with disturbing information. Bishop Francis, the responsible bishop, had been evasive about the accusations against Father Michael, but had let slip something crucial. It wasn't the first time the priest had faced similar accusations. He mentioned previous problems that were adequately resolved, Victor reported. When I pressed for more details, he said that the church has its own methods for dealing with internal matters. That confirms what we suspected, Monica said. There's a pattern of behavior that has been systematically covered up. But the most shocking revelation came when Victor told about his conversation with the bishop's secretary. She told me discreetly that there are at least 3 other cases of children who have made similar accusations against Father Michael in the last 10 years. All were silenced through financial settlements with the families. 3 other children, Agnes murmured, covering her face with her hands. How many children suffered while they protected this monster? The discovery of other victims brought a new urgency to the situation. If they could contact those families and gather testimonies, they would have a much stronger case against the priest and the diocese itself. But how do we find those families if everything has been kept secret? Carol asked. It was Monica who suggested a different approach. What if we make public what we know? If we make a public denunciation, other victims may feel encouraged to speak up. That would expose us even more, Richard warned, and it could hurt Lily. Dad, Lily is already hurt. She lives in fear that the bad father will come back to get her. The only way for her to feel truly safe is knowing that he can't hurt anyone else. The decision to make the case public was made as a family, including Lily in the conversation, in a way appropriate for her age. When they asked if she wanted other children to know about the bad father so that he couldn't hurt them anymore, her answer was clear and determined. Yes. Bad father can't hurt more children. Lily will tell everyone. The courage of a 4-year-old child was about to unleash a war much bigger than any of them had imagined. But it was also about to initiate the true justice that Lily and so many other children deserved. The next day, Dr. Thompson began preparations for a press conference that would forever change the lives of everyone involved. Victor and Agnes Smith, using their influence and resources, ensured that the story reached the main media outlets in the region. Once we make this public, there's no turning back, Dr. Thompson warned. You need to be prepared for the consequences. We're prepared, Richard said, looking at Lily, who was playing peacefully in the garden, oblivious to the storm that was about to break over their lives. For her, we're prepared for anything. The press conference was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in the ballroom of the most reputable hotel in Harmony Creek. Victor Smith had used his influence to ensure the presence of journalists from Albany and even New York City, promising revelations that would shake the foundations of public trust in sacred institutions. On the eve of the event, the tension in the Harding home was palpable. Lily, sensitive to the emotions of the adults around her, had become quieter and more observant, as if sensing that something important was about to happen. "Mommy Carol," she said during dinner, "are bad men going to come?" "No, my darling," Carol replied, trying to keep her voice calm. "Tomorrow we're going to talk to good people who will help other children." "Like me?" Lily asked, her big eyes fixed on Carol's face. "Yes, like you." But during the night, something happened that almost cancelled all the plans. Richard was awakened by the sound of glass shattering downstairs. When he went down to investigate, he found a rock in the middle of the living room, wrapped in a piece of paper with a threatening message: "Stop now or suffer the consequences. Some truths are too dangerous to be told." "They're trying to intimidate us," Monica said, examining the note. "This only confirms that we're on the right track." "But it also confirms that we're in real danger," Richard replied, looking out the window at the dark street. "Maybe we should reconsider." "Dad," Monica interrupted, "if we give up now, Lily will never be truly safe, and other children will continue to suffer." The morning of the press conference arrived with unusual activity in the town. Cars with out-of-state license plates parked near the hotel, and there was a discreet but noticeable buzz among the locals. Some people positioned themselves in small groups nearby, clearly awaiting developments. When the Harding family and the Smiths arrived at the hotel, they were greeted by Dr. Thompson and a team of lawyers that Victor had hired from Albany. The ballroom was packed. Journalists, local authorities, and surprisingly, several families that no one expected to see. "Who are these people?" Agnes asked, observing a group of adults with children who seemed nervous but determined. Dr. Thompson smiled for the first time in weeks. "They're the other families, Agnes." When word of the press conference spread discreetly, 3 families contacted us. They also have children who were victims of Father Michael. The revelation was like a wave of relief and validation. Richard observed the other families, ordinary people, honest workers who had kept painful secrets for years, fearing they wouldn't be believed or facing the same institutional protection they had encountered. "Mr. Harding," a woman of 40 years old approached, holding the hand of a boy of approximately 8 years old. "My name is Marcia Santos. This is my son, Pedro. When we heard that you were going to speak publicly about the priest, we decided it was time for our family to find courage too," completed a man who introduced himself as Marcia's husband. Pedro, the boy, looked at Richard with eyes that carried a prematurely painful maturity that was all too familiar. "Do you know the bad father too?" he asked simply. "Yes," Richard replied, kneeling to be at the boy's height. "And we're going to make sure he never hurts children like you again." When the press conference began, Dr. Thompson presented the facts meticulously and professionally. He detailed the discovery of Lily, the evidence of abuse collected, the investigation at the orphanage, and above all, the systematic protection that Father Michael had received from the diocese. "Today we are not here just to denounce a crime," he said to the cameras. "We are here to expose a pattern of cover-up that allowed multiple children to suffer unnecessarily." One by one, the families told their stories. Marcia Santos revealed how her son had been abused during catechism classes and how her complaints were dismissed by the parish. Another father, John Pereira, told how his daughter developed severe trauma after spiritual counseling sessions with the priest, and how the family was pressured to accept a financial settlement in exchange for silence. "It was $5,000, John said, his voice trembling with anger and shame. $5,000 for my daughter to suffer in silence and for him to continue free to hurt other children. But it was when Victor Smith stood up to speak that the atmosphere in the room changed completely. His imposing presence and the revelation that he was the grandfather of one of the victims brought additional gravity to the accusations. "My granddaughter," he said, his voice controlled but laden with emotion, "was systematically abused by a man we trusted to protect her. And when we discovered the truth, we found not just a predator, but an entire institution dedicated to protecting him." Victor then did something that no one expected. He revealed financial documents showing the substantial donations that his family had made to the diocese over the years. "Our money, given in good faith for charitable works, was used to cover up crimes against children," he said. "We demand not only justice, but a full investigation into how our resources were used to protect a criminal." The question session from the journalists was intense. They questioned about physical evidence, about the response from the diocese, about the next legal steps. It was when a journalist from New York City asked the question that changed everything. "Mr. Smith, do you have knowledge of Father Michael's current whereabouts?" Victor hesitated for a moment before answering. "We know that he was transferred to another diocese, but the exact location has not been disclosed to us. Because," said the journalist, consulting her notes, "our investigation team has discovered that Father Michael was not just transferred, he was promoted. He is now the spiritual director of a seminary in Pennsylvania, where he is in direct contact with young aspirants to the priesthood." The silence that followed was deafening. The idea that the priest had not only escaped the consequences, but had been rewarded with a position of even greater influence over vulnerable young people was like a punch in the stomach to everyone present. That's impossible," Agnes murmured. "Unfortunately, it's true," continued the journalist, "and there's more. According to our sources, in the last 2 months, 2 families in Pennsylvania have made informal complaints about inappropriate behavior of the new spiritual director with some seminarians." The revelation triggered an uproar in the room. Journalists asked questions frantically, the victimized families protested indignantly, and Richard felt as if all the work they had done to protect Lily had been in vain if the priest continued free to create new victims. It was Monica who stood up and asked for silence. "This information only confirms what we already knew. A predator protected by the system will continue to create victims until he is definitively prevented from doing so." "What do you intend to do now?" a journalist asked. "We're going to Pennsylvania," Victor Smith replied without hesitation. "We're going to alert the families there. We're going to talk to the local authorities, and we're going to make sure that this time he is really stopped." "What about the child? Will Lily go with you on this new investigation?" "Lily," Richard said, "will stay safe while we fight to ensure that no other child goes through what she went through." When the press conference ended, the journalists left quickly to prepare their reports. In a few hours, the story would be on the main news programs and newspapers in the region. But for the families involved, that was just the beginning of an even more difficult journey. "Dad," Monica said as they left the hotel, "are you sure that Lily should stay here while you go to Pennsylvania?" "She's been through enough trauma," Richard replied. "I'm not going to expose her to more suffering." "But what if the priest finds out where she is? What if they try to silence her definitively?" It was a possibility that terrified them all. Lily had become not only a victim, but the main witness against a man who apparently had enough resources and protection to continue evading justice. That night, as they planned the trip to Pennsylvania, none of them imagined that the real battle for Lily's safety was just beginning, and that the forces they were challenging were much more powerful and dangerous than anyone had imagined. The fallout from the press conference was greater than anyone had predicted. In 24 hours, the story had spread throughout the country, with national media outlets replicating the allegations and calling for an official position from the Catholic Church. The phone at the Harding home wouldn't stop ringing. Journalists, lawyers, other families reporting similar cases, and also threatening calls that made Richard seriously consider hiring private security. Lily, noticing the agitation around her, had become more withdrawn. She spent hours drawing, but now her drawing showed not only the bad father, but also many people talking, microphones, and herself hidden among all these threatening figures. "She's scared of all this exposure," Monica observed during an improvised therapy session. "For a child who has already suffered so much trauma, all this attention is disturbing." "Maybe we should reconsider the trip to Pennsylvania," Carol suggested. "Lily needs stability now, not more changes." But before they could make a final decision, they received a call that changed everything. Dr. Thompson called urgently on Thursday morning, his voice loaded with contained excitement. "Richard, you need to come to my office immediately. I've brought Victor and Agnes too. We have extraordinary developments." When they arrived at the office, they found Dr. Thompson accompanied by an unknown woman, an attorney from Washington, D.C., who introduced herself as Dr. Carmen Oliveira, a specialist in crimes against children and linked to the federal prosecutor's office. "Gentlemen," Dr. Carmen said, "the exposure you made yesterday unleashed something much bigger than you imagined. We have received more than 15 formal complaints against Father Michael in the last 24 hours, coming from 4 different states." 15, Agnes murmured, covering her mouth with her hands. "And that's not all. One of the complaints came from an adult seminarian in Pennsylvania, confirming that the inappropriate behavior continued even after the transfer. But most importantly, Dr. Carmen paused, opening a folder. "We obtained a search warrant for the priest's residence and office in Harmony Creek." "Based on what?" Victor asked. "On the collective testimony of the victims, and on the specific description that the girl Lily made about physical evidence kept in his office. A federal judge understood that there are sufficient indications that there are materials that would prove not only the abuses, but possibly a larger network of crimes." "Larger network?" Richard asked, feeling a chill in his stomach. "Mr. Harding, some of the reports we have received suggest that Father Michael may have been documenting his crimes, possibly for blackmail or for exchange with other predators. If that's true, we're talking about a large-scale federal investigation. The magnitude of what they were facing hit everyone like a wave. It was no longer just about protecting Lily or seeking justice for her. They were potentially exposed to a much wider and more dangerous criminal network. "When will the search take place?" Dr. Thompson asked. "This afternoon. And we would like Lily to be present under appropriate psychological supervision to confirm whether the location corresponds to her descriptions." "Absolutely not," Richard said firmly. "I'm not going to expose her to more trauma." "Mr. Harding, I understand your concern, but her testimony may be crucial to validate the evidence we find. Without that confirmation, any material seized may be challenged legally." Monica spoke up. "Dr. Carmen, as a psychologist, can I supervise Lily's participation in a way that minimizes the trauma? She wouldn't need to enter the location, just confirm if she recognizes the environment." "That would be ideal," confirmed the federal attorney. The decision was made reluctantly, but everyone understood that it was necessary. Lily would be taken to observe only the exterior of the priest's residence, and only if she confirmed that it was the place of the abuses, the search would proceed based on her testimony. At 3 in the afternoon, a coordinated operation was mounted at Father Michael's rectory. There were vehicles from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, from the Justice Department, and an ambulance with psychologists specializing in child trauma. The movement attracted a crowd of onlookers and also groups of faithful who protested against what they considered an unjust persecution of the church. Lily arrived in Richard's car, accompanied by Monica and a federal psychologist. When she saw the house, her reaction was immediate and unequivocal. bad father's house," she said, hiding behind Monica. "Lily doesn't want to go there." "You're not going to enter, honey," Monica assured her. "We just need you to confirm that it's the place you drew." Lily pointed to a specific window on the second floor. "Room of the books. Little box is there." Her description corresponded exactly to the drawings she had made, providing the legal validation needed for the search to proceed. What the investigators found in the priest's office exceeded even the worst expectations. Behind a bookshelf of religious books, there was a small safe containing hundreds of photographs of children, documents detailing methods of spiritual discipline, and even more shocking, correspondence with other members of the clergy discussing special children who needed particular attention. "My God," Dr. Thompson murmured, when Dr. Carman showed him some of the evidence seized. "This goes far beyond what we imagined. And there's something more," she said, showing a notebook with handwritten notes. He kept detailed records of each child, including information about their families, vulnerabilities, and methods, most effective manipulation techniques. When they learned that Lily's name appeared multiple times in this notebook, with disturbing descriptions about her docile personality and ideal family isolation, Richard felt a fury he had never experienced before. "Where is he now?" he asked, with a controlled but dangerous voice. "He has already been detained in Pennsylvania. He's being transported here under federal custody." But while they celebrated this partial victory, another development was happening that threatened everything they had achieved. The diocese, facing the biggest crisis in its recent history, had hired a high-profile law firm and was preparing an aggressive legal counteroffensive. "They are claiming that the evidence was planted," explained Dr. Thompson at an emergency meeting the following night, "and that Lily was coerced into making false accusations through psychological manipulation." "That's absurd," Victor protested. "It may be absurd, but it's a valid legal strategy. They will question the credibility of a traumatized child, the legality of the methods of collecting testimony, and mainly, they will attack your motivation." "Our motivation?" Sister Agnes asked. "They will claim that you orchestrated this whole situation to gain notoriety and financial compensation, that you exploited a vulnerable child for your own benefit." The diocese's strategy was clear. Instead of defending the priest, they would attack the victims and their families. It was a cruel tactic, but legally effective if they could sow doubts about the credibility of the accusations. "And there's something else," continued Dr. Thompson hesitantly. "They have filed a petition questioning the suitability of Lily's guardianship. They claim that a child who is being used as a witness in such a traumatic case cannot be under the care of the people involved in the accusation." "They want to take Lily away from us?" Carol asked, horrified. "It's a possibility. A judge may decide that to protect the integrity of her testimony, she should be placed in neutral custody during the process." That night, as Lily slept peacefully, unaware of the legal storm brewing around her, the Harding family and the Smiths faced the reality that their fight for justice had become a war that could cost them not only their reputation and security, but the very child they were trying to protect. "If they manage to take Lily away from us now," said Richard, looking at the girl through the half-open door of the room, "after everything she's been through, it could completely destroy her ability to trust any adult again." "Then we won't let that happen," replied Victor with determination. "Regardless of the cost, we will not let them use the system against her once again." It was a brave promise, but they all knew that the forces they now faced had resources, influence, and determination that made the battle for Lily's custody far more dangerous than anything they had faced until then. The legal battle intensified dramatically in the following weeks. The law firm hired by the diocese had obtained an injunction preventing any change in Lily's guardianship situation until an independent psychological evaluation was carried out to determine whether she was being influenced or manipulated in her testimony. Dr. Henry Moore, read Dr. Thompson from the official document. He is the forensic psychologist who has been appointed by the court to evaluate Lily. He has a complicated reputation. Complicated how? Victor asked, frowning. He tends to strongly question children's testimonies in abuse cases. He has invalidated several cases in the past, claiming that the children were contaminated by adults with their own motivations. The news left the whole family shaken. Monica, especially, felt frustrated to see her careful work with Lily being questioned by someone who didn't even know the child. They chose this psychologist specifically because they know he will question our credibility, she said during a tense family meeting. It's a manipulation of the judicial system. Meanwhile, Lily began to show signs of regression in her recovery. She had stopped talking almost completely again, returning to the dark drawings of the early days and developing new compulsive behaviors, such as washing her hands repeatedly and checking if all the doors in the house were locked. "She feels she's in danger again," observed Sister Agnes, seeing her granddaughter hide under the kitchen table during another of the panic attacks that had returned to happen daily. "The legal instability is affecting her as much as the original trauma," agreed Carol, trying to coax Lily out of her hiding place. The evaluation with Dr. Moore was scheduled for a Friday morning at his private office. The family was instructed not to accompany Lily during the session to avoid interference in the objective evaluation, leaving her alone with a stranger for the first time since arriving at the Hardings' house. "I don't want to go," said Lily on the morning of the evaluation, clinging to Richard's neck with desperate force. "Man, doctor going to hurt Lily?" "No, honey. He's just going to talk to you," lied Richard, his heart breaking to see the fear in the girl's eyes. "Promise you come back get Lily?" "I promise. Daddy Richard always comes back to get you." It was the first time Lily had called him Daddy, and the timing of the statement, just when she was most vulnerable and scared, made Richard fight back tears. The session with Dr. Moore lasted 3 hours, much longer than would be appropriate for a child of Lily's age. When they finally picked her up, they found her in a state of extreme agitation, shaking and refusing to talk about what had happened during the evaluation. "He asked a lot of questions about you," was all they could extract from her that night. "Asked if you told Lily to say bad things about the priest." "And what did you answer?" Monica asked softly. "Said priest bad hurt Lily, but doctor said maybe Lily is confused." The manipulation was clear and revolting. Dr. Moore had used questionable techniques to plant doubts in the mind of an already traumatized child, making her question her own memories and the reliability of the people who protected her. "He's trying to discredit her testimony," said Dr. Thompson when he heard the details. "It's a common tactic, but ethically questionable when used with such a young child." 2 days later, they received Dr. Moore's preliminary report, and the content was devastating. It concluded that Lily presented clear signs of external influence in her statements, and that there were significant inconsistencies in her account that suggested contamination by adult suggestion. "This is a sham!" Victor exploded upon reading the document. "He's deliberately distorting the situation." "It may be a sham, but it's an official report from an expert recognized by the court," warned Dr. Thompson. "This may be enough for a judge to order Lily's removal from your care." It was at this moment of despair that something completely unexpected happened. Dr. Thompson received a call from Albany from Dr. Carmen Oliveira herself, and her first words completely changed the course of the situation. "Roberto, I need you to come to Albany immediately. We have developments that could change everything." "What kind of developments?" "I can't talk on the phone. But let's just say that the federal investigation revealed connections that go far beyond what anyone imagined, and that we have evidence that could not only save Lily, but expose much greater corruption." The trip to Albany was arranged in a matter of hours. Lily was left in the care of Carol and Monica, while Richard and Victor went to the state capitol with Dr. Thompson. What they discovered in the federal prosecutor's office exceeded their worst suspicions. Doctor. Henry Moore, explained Dr. Carman, showing a series of documents, has received substantial payments from an account linked to the diocese in the last 5 years, always coinciding with cases in which he invalidated children's testimonies against members of the clergy. He's being paid to discredit victims, Richard asked, horrified. Not just him. We discovered a network of professionals, psychologists, lawyers, even some social workers, who receive financial compensation to question the credibility of allegations against the church. Victor studied the documents with growing outrage. How many cases have been dismissed because of this corruption? We are investigating dozens of cases over the past 10 years. Hundreds of children may have been deprived of justice because of this scheme. And what about Father Michael? Ah, he's just the tip of the iceberg, said Dr. Carman with a grim smile. The evidence we found in his office led us to an international network of exchange of child abuse material involving members of the clergy from various countries. The magnitude of the scandal was staggering. What had begun as an isolated case of an abused child had transformed into the exposure of systemic corruption that involved not only the protection of predators, but the active monetization of the silencing of their victims. "Will Dr. Moore be arrested?" asked Dr. Thompson. "Today, along with 6 other professionals involved in the scheme, and his report on Lily will be annulled due to conflict of interest and active corruption." "And Lily? Is she safe now?" "More than safe. With the evidence we have, not only will she stay with you, but the case will become a landmark in the protection of child victims of institutional abuse." When they returned to Harmony Creek with this news, they found Lily playing quietly in the garden with Monica, seemingly oblivious to the legal revolution that was happening around her. Sister Agnes and Carol were in the kitchen preparing dinner and talking about future plans for the girls' education. "She asked if you would come back today," said Carol when she saw Richard. "Said she dreamed you brought good news." When they told the family about the developments in Albany, the relief was palpable. But it was Lily's reaction that most moved them. When they explained that the doctor who asked bad questions could no longer bother her, she simply nodded and continued playing. "Lily knew you were going to protect her," she said naturally. "Family protects." That night, as Lily slept safely in her bed, the adults gathered to discuss the future. The legal issues would still take months to be fully resolved, but now they were sure that Lily would stay with them. "There's one thing we still need to resolve," said Victor, looking at Richard and Carol, "the issue of definitive custody." "What do you mean?" asked Sister Agnes. "Well, officially, Sister Agnes and I are the biological grandparents. But Richard and Carol are the emotional parents. Monica is the one who conducted the therapy that saved her. We are all her family." "What are you suggesting?" asked Richard. "I'm suggesting that we find a legal way to ensure that Lily has access to all of us, that she grows up knowing that she has a large family that loves her unconditionally." It was a complex proposal from a legal point of view, but emotionally it made perfect sense. Lily had found not only one family, but several people willing to sacrifice everything for her safety and happiness. "We'll figure out how to make it work," said Dr. Thompson. "After everything we've been through, finding a legal solution for a non-conventional family should be the easiest part." But while they planned this optimistic future, none of them suspected that there was still a final revelation that would change not only Lily's life, but the understanding of her entire story in a way that no one could have foreseen. 3 weeks had passed since the discovery of the corruption network, and life was beginning to acquire a more stable routine. Lily had returned to speaking normally, her nightmares had decreased dramatically, and she showed a growing curiosity about her personal history, asking questions about her biological mother that Sister Agnes answered with affection and honesty. "Did Mommy Valerie like to draw too?" she asked one afternoon while doing one of her colorful drawings, now full of flowers, happy birds, and smiling family figures. Very much, replied Sister Agnes, showing some old drawings that she had brought from Albany. She was a lot like you when she was your age. It was during one of these conversations about Valerie that Sister Agnes mentioned something she had kept as a detail too painful to be shared before. Lily, your mother left some things for you before leaving for heaven, things that I kept, waiting for the right day to show you. What things, Grandma? Letters. She wrote letters for you, one for each birthday until you turn 18. She wanted you to know how much she loved you, even if she couldn't be here. The revelation touched not only Lily, but the whole family. The idea that Valerie had foreseen her own absence and tried to create a future connection with her daughter was both touching and devastating. "Can I read my birthday letter now?" asked Lily, who would turn 5 next month. "Of course, my dear. I'll get it for you." Sister Agnes returned from her temporary home with a small and carefully preserved box. Inside, there were 15 sealed envelopes, each marked with a specific age. She picked up the envelope marked 5 years and handed it to Lily with trembling hands. "Do you want me to read it for you?" offered Monica. "Want to try alone first," said Lily, with surprising determination for a child of her age. She opened the envelope with excessive care, as if it were something extremely precious. The letter inside was written in delicate and feminine handwriting, in simple language that a 5-year-old could understand. "My dear Lily," began Lily to read aloud, her finger following the words. "Today you turn 5 years old, and I wanted to be there to sing happy birthday and give you a tight hug. Even if I can't be present, I want you to know that you are the most beautiful thing that has ever happened in my life." Lily's voice began to tremble as she continued reading. "If you're reading this letter, it means that very special people are taking care of you. I'm sure they love you as much as I love you. Always remember that you are strong, brave, and deserve to be happy." There were a few more lines about dreams and hopes that Valerie had for her daughter's future, but it was the last sentence that left everyone in silence. "P.S. If you ever want to better understand our story, look for Sister Teresa at St. Jude's Orphanage. She knows a secret that may be important to you." "Sister Teresa?" Richard murmured. "The staff member who told us about the priest." "Why did Mommy Valerie know Sister Teresa?" Lily asked, looking around at the adults for answers they clearly didn't have. Sister Agnes seemed as surprised as the others. "I have no idea. Valerie never mentioned knowing anyone at the orphanage." "Maybe we should contact Sister Teresa," Victor suggested. "If Valerie left this message, it must be something important." Dr. Thompson offered to make the contact, as he had established a relationship of trust with the staff member during the previous investigations. 2 days later, he brought news that no one expected. "Sister Teresa wants to meet with us in person," he said, "but not at the orphanage. She said she needs to tell us something she could never reveal before, and that now, with Father Michael arrested and the investigation having exposed the corruptions, she finally feels safe to talk." The meeting was scheduled for a discreet cafe in the neighboring town. Sister Teresa arrived visibly nervous, constantly looking around, as if fearing being watched. When she saw Lily, her eyes filled with tears. "My God, she is exactly like Valerie when she was a baby," she murmured. "Sister Teresa," Sister Agnes said gently, "my daughter's letter mentioned that you know an important secret about our story." Teresa took a deep breath, as if gathering courage for a confession she had kept for years. "Valerie did not die during childbirth," she said abruptly, leaving everyone in complete shock. The silence that followed was deafening. Victor and Sister Agnes looked at each other as if they couldn't process what they had just heard. "What do you mean?" Sister Agnes murmured, her voice almost inaudible. "She survived the birth. She was weak but alive. Father Michael, he told everyone that she had died due to complications, but I was there. I saw her breathing." "That's impossible," Victor said, standing up sharply. We had the funeral." "You had the funeral of an empty coffin," said Teresa, tears streaming down her face. The priest organized everything. He said it was better that way, that Valerie was too traumatized by the birth, and that it would be better for everyone if she disappeared for a while. "Where is she?" asked Sister Agnes, grabbing Teresa's arm. "I don't know. After the birth, she was taken somewhere. The priest said she was being treated for mental problems resulting from the trauma, but I always suspected there was something more sinister happening." Lily, who had been listening to the conversation without fully understanding its implications, asked the question that terrified all the adults. "Does that mean my mommy might be alive?" "Honey," Monica said softly, "we don't know yet, but we're going to find out." "Why didn't you ever tell us this before?" Richard asked, trying to maintain his composure. "Because I was afraid. Father Michael controlled everything in the orphanage. He had connections throughout the region. He threatened me directly, said that if I said anything, I would lose my job and no one would believe me against his word." "And do you have any idea where Valerie might be now?" 5 years ago, I tried to investigate discreetly. I found that a young woman matching her description had been admitted to a private psychiatric clinic in Pennsylvania, in the same region where the priest was transferred after. The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in a horrifying way. Father Michael had not only abused children, he had orchestrated Valerie's kidnapping, faked her death, and possibly kept her interned against her will for 5 years. "My God," whispered Sister Agnes. "Our daughter may have been alive all this time, and we didn't even look for her." "You didn't look because you were deceived by someone you trusted," said Dr. Thompson, trying to comfort the couple. "Don't blame yourselves for this." "We need to go to Pennsylvania immediately," said Victor, his voice laden with determination and despair. "Grandma, can I see my real mommy?" asked Lily, her big eyes shining with a hope that broke everyone's heart. "We don't know yet, honey," replied Sister Agnes, "but we're going to do everything we can to find out." The trip to Pennsylvania was arranged in a matter of hours, this time with the official support of the Federal Prosecutor's Office. Dr. Carmen mobilized resources to investigate the psychiatric clinic mentioned by Sister Teresa, and Dr. Thompson began preparing the legal documents that would be needed if Valerie was indeed found alive. "If she's there, if she's alive," said Richard during the trip, "imagine the trauma of discovering that she lost 5 years of her daughter's life. And imagine Lily's trauma at discovering that the mother she thought was in heaven was actually trapped in a psychiatric hospital," added Monica. "It was an unprecedented situation, laden with both wonderful and devastating possibilities." The prospect of reuniting mother and daughter was exciting, but the circumstances of a possible reunion were so complex that none of them knew how to prepare Lily or themselves for what they might find. As they traveled towards Pennsylvania, carrying hopes and fears in equal measure, none of them suspected that the truth about Valerie would be even more shocking and complicated than anything they had imagined until then. "Mommy might be sick like Lily was?" asked the girl during the trip. "Maybe, honey," replied Sister Agnes. "But if she's sick, we'll take care of her until she gets well. Like you took care of me. Like we took care of you." It was a simple promise, but carrying the weight of 5 years of forced separation, institutional trauma, and a family that was just beginning to discover the true extent of the lies and manipulations that had shaped their lives. The St. Raphael Clinic, located on the outskirts of Harrisburg, was a respectable-looking institution, with well-kept gardens and a facade that suggested quality medical care. But when Dr. Carmen presented the court order for access to patient records, the immediate resistance from the administration revealed that there were secrets being protected there. "We have no patient with that name," insisted the director, Dr. August Pierce, a 60-year-old man who avoided direct eye contact. "Dr. Pierce," said Dr. Carmen firmly, "we have a federal order. We will check all records from the last 5 years, including patients admitted under false names or without proper documentation." That's when an older nurse who had observed the discussion from afar discreetly approached Monica. "Are you looking for a young brunette woman, interned 5 years ago for postpartum problems?" she whispered. "Yes, exactly. Ward C, room 23. She is registered as patient X47. She never receives visits, never leaves the room, and, well, there are strange things about her case." "What kind of strange things?" "Her bills are paid in cash by a representative of the church, and she doesn't receive the same kind of treatment as the other patients. It's more like she's being kept here against her will." When they arrived at room 23, they found a 22-year-old woman sitting next to the window, looking at the garden with a blank expression. Her brown hair was long and unkempt, her skin pale from lack of sun, but there was an undeniable resemblance to the photographs of Valerie that Sister Agnes carried. "Valerie!" called Sister Agnes softly, entering the room. The young woman turned slowly, and when her eyes met Sister Agnes's, there was a flicker of recognition that made the mother's heart race. "Mom!" Her voice came out weak, almost inaudible, as if she hadn't used her vocal cords properly in a long time. "Yes, my daughter, it's me. I've come to get you." What followed was one of the most emotional moments that anyone present had ever witnessed. Valerie rose hesitantly and walked towards her mother, her legs weak from years of excessive sedation and lack of activity. When they hugged, both began to cry. Sister Agnes out of relief and joy, Valerie out of confusion and cautious hope. "They told me you had died," Valerie murmured against her mother's shoulder. "They said I'd gone crazy with the loss, and that it was better for me to forget the past." "We were told that you died in childbirth," replied Sister Agnes, her voice choked. "We were all deceived. And my daughter, my baby." It was then that Victor signaled to Richard, who was waiting in the hallway with Lily. The girl entered the room holding Richard's hand, her big eyes studying the thin and pale woman who was her biological mother. "Valerie," said Sister Agnes softly, "this is Lily, your daughter." Valerie's reaction was instantaneous and visceral. She knelt on the floor and stretched out her arms, tears streaming down her face. "My little one, you've grown so much. You're so beautiful." Lily hesitated for a moment, studying the face of the woman she had imagined so many times. Then, with the intuitive wisdom of children, she approached slowly and gently touched Valerie's face. "Mommy was sick too?" she asked. "Very sick, honey, but now I'm better because I found you." "I drew you many times," said Lily, taking a folded paper from her pocket. "Want to see?" The drawing showed a long-haired woman hugging a small child, surrounded by colorful birds and flowers. In the corner, Lily had written in her childish handwriting, "For Mommy in heaven, with love from Lily." "You thought I was in heaven?" asked Valerie, understanding the pain that her daughter had carried. "Aunt Carol said you left because of me, but now I know it's not true. It was never your fault, my dear, never." Dr. Pierce and the medical staff tried to intervene, claiming that Valerie was not in a condition to leave the clinic, but Dr. Carmen presented federal documents ordering her immediate release and a full investigation into the circumstances of her forced internment. "This patient has been held here under false pretenses," she declared. "We are investigating not only kidnapping, but also medical fraud and conspiracy." During the emergency medical examinations performed at a public hospital, it was discovered that Valerie had been systematically sedated with unnecessary medications to keep her docile and confused. Her hospitalization had been maintained through false diagnoses of postpartum schizophrenia and suicidal tendencies. "She was perfectly sane when she was admitted," explained the doctor who conducted the evaluation. "All this time of hospitalization was medically unjustified. It's a clear case of false imprisonment." In the days that followed, as Valerie physically recovered from the effects of prolonged medication, the family worked carefully to rebuild the bonds between mother and daughter. Lily showed surprising patience with Valerie's fragility, often bringing drawings and small gifts for her. "Mommy Valerie needs to eat more," observed Lily during a meal. "She's too thin." "You're right," agreed Carol, who had become a natural bridge between the two, helping Valerie adapt to maternal care while respecting the bond that Lily had already formed with her. The family dynamic that emerged was complex but surprisingly harmonious. Lily called Valerie Mommy Valerie and Carol Mommy Carol, naturally accepting that she could have two mothers who loved her in different ways. Valerie, in turn, was deeply grateful to Richard and Carol for having saved and raised her daughter during her forced absence. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, during one of the many conversations they had about the future. "You gave Lily the love and security that I couldn't give." "You gave her life," replied Carol, "and now we can give her a complete family." The trial of Father Michael and his accomplices became one of the most followed cases in the national media. The revelations about the network of corruption, the kidnapping of Valerie, the systematic abuse of children, and the conspiracy to cover up crimes shocked the entire country. Valerie, supported by the entire family, gave courageous testimony about her 5 years of captivity, disguised as medical treatment. Lily, although protected from the cameras, had her testimony recorded in a closed session, helping to build an irrefutable case against her tormentors. "Bad priest can't hurt children anymore," she said to Monica after testifying. "Did Lily help catch him?" "You were very brave and helped protect many other children," confirmed Monica. Father Michael was sentenced to 30 years in prison for multiple crimes, including child abuse, kidnapping, falsification of documents, and conspiracy. Dr. Moore and other corrupted professionals received sentences ranging from 10 to 15 years. The diocese was forced to pay substantial compensation to all victims and implement rigorous child protection protocols. 6 months after the reunion, the family had established a new routine. Valerie lived in a small house near the Hardings, gradually regaining her independence while building a genuine relationship with Lily. The girl spent time with both families, attended a local school where she was excelling academically, and had become a visibly happy and secure child. "You know," said Valerie during a Sunday dinner at the Hardings' house, "I used to dream that one day I would have a big and loving family. I never imagined it would be exactly like this, but it's perfect." Lily, now 5 years old and speaking fluently, smiled at everyone around the table. "I have the biggest family in the world. I have Mommy Valerie, Mommy Carol, Daddy Richard, Grandpa Victor, Grandma Sister Agnes, and Aunt Monica." "And we all have you," replied Richard, picking her up in his arms. That night, as Lily slept peacefully in her room, the same room where she had arrived years ago as a traumatized and mute child, Richard and Carol talked about the extraordinary journey they had lived. "Do you regret anything?" Carol asked. "Only not acting faster on that first day," he replied. "But otherwise, no. Every decision we made brought us here. We saved Lily, but she also saved us," Carol observed. "She gave us a purpose we didn't even know we were looking for." Through the window, they could see Valerie's house, where a soft light still shone. The young mother was probably writing in her diary, a habit she had developed as part of her therapy to process the lost years and celebrate each recovered day with her daughter. In the next room, Monica studied for her master's degree in child psychology, inspired by the experience with Lily to specialize in the treatment of traumatized children. She had decided to dedicate her career to ensuring that other children had access to the appropriate help more quickly. And in Albany, Victor and Sister Agnes Smith had established a foundation to support families in similar situations, using the compensation received from the church to create a positive legacy from the tragedy they had faced. The story that had begun with the desperate cries of a child thrown in the dumpster had transformed into a celebration of resilience, justice, and the transformative power of unconditional love. Lily had found not only one family, but multiple people willing to fight for her safety and happiness, and perhaps more importantly, she had discovered her own voice, literally and figuratively. The girl who had suffered in silence for so long now spoke with confidence, laughed frequently, and dreamed of a bright future surrounded by people who truly loved her. "Good night, my warrior," Richard whispered, checking on her one last time before going to sleep. In the darkness of the room, Lily murmured sleepily, "Good night, Daddy. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for saving us too, little one." It was the perfect conclusion to a story that had tested the limits of human courage, compassion, and the determination to do what is right, regardless of the personal cost. Lily was finally safe, loved, and free to simply be a happy child, something that had seemed impossible not long ago.